Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I am your host, Angela Wetzel. I am a life and relationship coach. This is also your co-host, Nick Carl. He's an experienced somatic experiencer. And here we're here to talk about, and I had like a certain phrase that I was saying that I really liked, but it's we're here to like demystify. No, anyway, I don't remember what I said. Something about removing. Oh, yes. Yes, destigmatize. No, uh, destigmatizing. Demystifying and destigmatizing.
That sounds
No,
right.
removing the stigma and enigma around emotions. That was it. All right, we did it anyway. We're super professional. Just remember, that's us. The So Emotional podcast is also the So Professional podcast.
So Professional Emotional podcast.
That's right. That's right. And today we are talking about projections because I actually think one of the most important things in this healing journey is to really be aware of projections because they can be super, 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 super sneaky. And it's such an intelligent defense strategy. What it does is it's like instead of recognizing and taking accountability for the smelly poo that's in your yard, it's kind of like your subconscious like puts all the poo and the smells over into your neighbor's yard so you can be like, it's you that stinks. Well, you're the one standing in it, right? So, and I don't know why I go to poop analogies, but it just is sort of my thing. Spirituality, poop. And I made this post the other day that said, you can't simultaneously say, not my monkeys, not my circus, while you're the one flinging the poo. Check your projections before you wreck your reflections. And what I meant by that last little phrase is if you don't understand what you're projecting, you're going to get a whole mess of reflection coming back at you. Your reality will be showing you things. And then if you're not owning or taking responsibility for those projections, you're going to feel highly victimized, highly angry, highly charged. You're going to be like, I'm surrounded by assholes. It's kind of like Spaceballs, where he's like, I'm surrounded by idiots. Like, who else is an idiot? And they're like, yo, like, right? If you've seen that movie, it's funny. If you haven't, watch it. It's funny. But yeah, so things that you might start to realize, or why you would want to understand if you're projecting and start to take ownership of those things, is because you can feel highly victimized. And until you are able to take responsibility, you are essentially powerless over a lot of different things in your life. And while you harbor a lot of internal judgments and areas that you still feel very weak and powerless and hurt around, instead of being able to heal those things, it's really just saying it's everyone else, it's not me. And while you're there, it's like life will continue to victimize and sodomize you. Maybe not sodomize you. I was thinking of maybe, I don't know if that's your thing. But yeah, so I think it's important that we look to ourselves as the common denominator. And to be clear, this invitation into taking personal responsibility and accountability is not the same thing as victim shaming and blaming. And I feel like that's very important because people can get very charged around the topic of saying, like, even if there's an invitation to talking about forgiveness or healing, forgiving people that hurt you, there is a certain demographic out there that I've seen where they're just like, this is victim blame and shame, and like it's not their responsibility to forgive. But remember, the emotions that are happening within you are affecting you. They're affecting your physiology. And it's important to recognize that you have a lot within your power of how you choose to perceive people, choose to perceive the situation, and even the larger paradigm that you operate in. And Nick, take it away. I feel like you have something to say because you're
Well,
nodding.
so I'm thinking about the larger paradigm. Okay, so what is a projection? Well, the first thing I think of is like what percentage of people think in terms of projection, or have an internal sense of their own projections and their own relationship with projections.
Hmm.
I don't know what that number is. I kind of suspect that it's low-ish, right? Like maybe
I do too.
20% of people or something. Okay. So outside of the seeing the world of where projections actually fit in, it's like you have to like imagine that the world consists of a certain amount of things, right? So um, I heard Michael, God, what is his name? Michael the
Finger?
Yeah, Michael Singer talk about samskaras, which is an old Sanskrit thing, which is your wounded parts inside of your own being, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have the physical world or our bodies, the things that happen out here. We have our thoughts, which is in our mind. We have our emotional bodies, which uh, reflect and project out. We have our own emotions, and then deep in our beings, we talk about it in terms of IFS, internal family systems, which are our parts, our deep internal parts, which are our deep internal ways that we see the world and how we were habituated into them. Um, Samskaras are essentially the same idea. They're just a different word for the same thing. So what we call parts, uh, the old Sanskrit, and I don't even know what civilization came up with that. They're called samskaras. These are our deep assumptions of how the world operates. Usually, they're from a wounding, right, or a protective piece. They're a protective mechanism, right, and they influx and influence our emotions when we come into contact with something that is going to bring up that consciousness of that old wound, right? And in this mechanism that's happening, right? This is where the operation of projection starts to happen, starts to occur. If you don't have any of the words or the knowledge or a sense of how that system happens, then it makes a lot of sense to me that you're not going to have any consciousness or any way to contextualize what a projection actually is and begin to take responsibility for that thing that happens.
Right.
So I can
Yeah,
I
because, oh, sorry. I was
so
just going to say, then you don't have you have no idea that you can have perspective. Like
right.
it just is one thing.
It just is. And so I can remember distinctly running through most of my life. I would say that I was I still have tons of projections, and like I'm not an enlightened perfect being, but say 10 years ago, I was way more projective when my internal emotional state, usually dipping into the negative, I would see I went for a long time being very angry, and I would see almost everything. I knew like when I would wake up and be having like a bad day, didn't matter really what I looked at. It was like a person, place, or a thing. I would just immediately I'd be like, "This is fucking shit. This is shit. You're terrible. You're a garbage thing. Everything you're doing is garbage." Which in that perspective, I'm reacting to whatever they're doing, right? And so this is me flinging the poo, looking at the poo, and just be like, "Ugh, you're terrible. You're garbage. This is gross. You're gross. Just get away from me." Right? That was a lot of the
Right.
energy that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is my internal emotional state was like at a boiling point. Like I was so repressed, right? That my inside emotional body is just like a powder keg. It was just compressed, compressed just hard. And that's, old wounds, old stuff just like coming out and boiling and just like going out into places. So
Yeah.
I lived in that state, which is completely projective. But I also think about in terms of my relationships, like eventually, just on long enough timeline, like it got projected. I projected on all of my friends. I still project on my own mother. I mean, that's like a deep lesson, of like walking in and like, like have a lot of strong emotions about that person, Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but there's this whole ecosystem and system inside where most of that energy, where most of that vitriol, where most of that hate, where most of all of that belongs to me. It's mine, right? The
Right.
world's really not doing anything, and all of that belongs to me. And that like system and that like how that works is also working in everybody else. And then you
Right.
can you can be going along and having a good time with people, but then when two people start to project on each other, then you, you can start to have these like wars, like these energetic wars, and things can
Mm-hmm.
fall apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like wherever you go, there you are. So wherever you go, you're going to take the same perspective. You're going to take your projections, you're taking your wounds, you're taking your behaviors. So you can pack up and move across the country, across the world, wherever, but likely you're going to experience the same kind of patterns and stories and, things where it's like if you have deep wounding around betrayal, you will literally find people that will betray you. Like you will have many stories, like very like different people, different flesh suit, similar scenario of betrayal that leads to the same outcome, or the same moral of the story is I can't trust people because people are XYZ. But what's interesting is these these circumstances of like betrayal and abandonment, they do end up being some sort of projection because it's what we're actually doing to ourselves. And then other people show up and they're kind of playing the role, like they're participating with our energy. And when it's not conscious, then we have unconscious agreements happening where it's like, I will be a victim, or I will victimize myself by not standing up for my own boundaries, my values, my standards, how I feel. And when you do these things, I will say that you are the bad guy. You are the one that has betrayed me. You have done this. And while there is some truth there where they are doing the actions, we have to question, why am I in this situation again? Why am I here in this relationship? Why have I opted into this situation again? And if you're willing to ask those questions and be honest with yourself, you're going to find some gold there. If you're brave enough to just be like, why is this happening again? Like what,
Right.
And that I think is like the beginning of being able to look at those projections and look at some of the patterns and the stories.
When I was introduced to my own like deep emotional body through some somatic experiencing work, it was really interesting then to go back, so I'd had a handful of significant long-term relationships, but they all followed the same pattern, right? They all essentially went to the exact same place. And I knew like deep down that like I couldn't fault these people. Like I had actually been partnered with wonderful people. Um,
Yeah.
I knew just the common denominator is me. And then
Mm-hmm.
once it was really funny, it's mind blowing is really what it is. Once I was introduced to my own emotional being and started to have the perspective of parts, right? And how these
Mm-hmm.
parts work, how they kind of come and go, and that they slid sort of behind my eyes and I became these parts, right? About it, retelling the story of my own relationship past was, I mean, it was absolutely fascinating and amazing and like heartbreaking too to understand that like the things that I thought were real were,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't come from where I thought they come from. They belonged to me,
Yeah.
right? And that was a little, that was tough. That was a tough pill to swallow.
Right. But also, it likely gave you the ability to like say, oh shit, this is me, this is mine. And then it gives you a sense of power to say, oh, I can actually make changes from here because now I can see what I'm doing. Like I can take ownership of this.
Yeah, well, for
Would you
sure.
say?
I mean, yes, to a certain extent. At least I know like what game I'm playing then, right? At least I know like what field I'm in because for many, many times I just found myself like in deep confusion, like deep, real confusion, and more just like body level avoidance, like, or, feeling like the walls are closing in, or I'm just have like abject fear or abject to like, like repulsion to like wherever I was at. There wasn't a lot of like high minded, like, I did think a lot about the situations I was in, but mostly it was like kind of like body level, deep, just like, I got to go here. Not really sure why, but I'm just going to do it. And I just would rationalize it to myself like, oh, yeah, it's just the way that it is. I guess I just don't like that person. It just didn't work out. We're just not right for each other. It's just kind of like
Right.
platitudes or whatever I could really muster as far as like reason, right? Reason was pretty scant, really. And after like a few times, a couple of decades, like it can feel pretty like it kind of felt like a little bit beat down about it, just like, I don't know, maybe that's not for me. Maybe connection is not for me. Maybe love is not for me. Maybe I'm not lovable. That kind of
Mm,
stuff, which are more projections.
right. Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I was just thinking, yeah, because if we find ourselves in those patterns and we're not able to stop and question, like to have that separation from the perspective to like observe ourselves like in our environment and like say, what am I thinking? Like, is this true? Is this actually true what I'm thinking? Like, what, because there's a difference between an objective reality and a subjective reality. So, an objective reality is literally like there's a cat and it ran under the bed, right? And this scenario, like, um, I was with somebody and they had a cat and they were trying to get the cat in the car, but when it came time to leave, the cat ran under the bed. So he's saying like this cat, like what an asshole, this cat's acting like an asshole. And it's like the objective reality is, well, the cat's a cat. The cat didn't want to go in the car. Like it was afraid, right? It
Right.
ran under the bed. It's like,
It's
fuck
like
that.
going
I
to the vet,
hate,
right?
yeah, it's like I hate riding in cars. It's like unpredictable. It's noisy. I'm like in a box of death or whatever the
Yeah.
cat is. I mean, I feel like this is also sort of like projecting because we don't know. It's just, it's like
Right.
objective reality. If we strip down everything into very like rote, dry details, we can say there was a cat. It ran under the bed and into the corner of the room and it was difficult to get out of there. Like we don't know what was emotionally going on inside the cat, but we can deduce that the cat was crouched in the corner. And when we tried to grab the cat, it was like, right? Those are like objective facts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the subjective layer, which can come into like arguments when there's projection as well, is like the cat's being an asshole or the cat was being spiteful or you know what I mean? So there's all these things that we start to imagine and just like make up. We're just making shit up, right? And so what and usually like how these projections or perspectives arrive is that there is another person that has a certain projection. So in childhood, I am guessing that, and I see this a lot, is that this person was treated this way. So when he had certain negative emotions arise, him misbehaving or being bad just because these emotions that he had, then he, through introjection, actually takes that upon himself to be like, from the outside looking in, his misbehaving, it means he's just an asshole. So, him doing what he wants, having his desires, having his emotions, wanting to get his needs met, somehow it's translated as that. So,
Mm-hmm.
then when there's a similar situation with this cat, then now he has adopted the same perspective of his parents. He has now taken that on and is now projecting that onto the cat, right? And if the cat were to have little kittens, then the cat could then project that onto their kittens. I mean, if the cat was, anyway, it's silly. But, and that's kind of how things can go generationally, is that we
Mm-hmm.
can have projections that we just carry through. Like rich people are assholes, or there's just like certain we would call them like limiting beliefs, but it is a certain perspective of like how we view the world. And it's important to look at these things and then challenge them, and to say like, is this actual reality, or is there some kind of story here that I'm making up?
Right. Last weekend, I went to a rock and roll show, and I saw a band that I really
Oh
liked,
yes.
and the lead singer is a beautiful gal. She's gorgeous, right? Which is a whole
Mm-hmm.
deep belief system inside of me, right? So I challenged
Mm-hmm.
myself to go talk with her, and of course I did. And I got about 2.5 sentences out before, like, I kind of locked up. Like, my brain just kind of went numb. My nervous system was
Yeah.
just like, my nervous system went into essentially freeze. It was danger, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is a deep projection of the reality of the situation. Is it's just two people talking in a low, like at a rock and roll show, like at a merch table, like pretty low stakes, really. There's
Mm-hmm.
not much happening. She's a stranger. She'll be leaving town tomorrow. I'll probably never see that person again in the rest of my life. Just like trying to have like fun, good energy conversation with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But because of like really attractive women, right? Maybe who are sort of like above me, and then like all these weird inner judgments and wanting to like be cool and like receive things and this whole matrices of things inside of me project into the situation. I then become fearful and lock up, right? Now I was challenging
Mm-hmm.
myself too because I kind of knew that this was a possibility. I went up. I tried to like psych myself. Like I'm going to do this. I'm cool. I can do these kinds of things because I know I can. Right. Like, and I'm an affable, decent person. I can hold a conversation. Like I'm okay. But I just to put myself in that situation, and I kind of squeaked. But that so it was a gamble, and I lost, but it was okay. But one of the things that I didn't do afterwards, which is also a thing that I'm practicing on, is then like judging myself for have sort of failed, which would have been like another layer of projection, of like, oh
Mm-hmm.
God, you're an idiot, you're so dumb. Like, why would you ever do that? Like, why would you ever talk?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't go there. Like, I just kind of like relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things I noticed while I was at the show after that happened, I kind of felt like my energy and my being. I noticed that sometimes I was noticing what was wrong either in the performance that was happening on stage or maybe like the vibe in the room. At one point, somebody in the crowd yelled something like really cringy, and I really let it like affect me. So it's this weird dance that's happening all the time of me watching my own
Mm-hmm.
emotions and being with my own emotions as they flow through me, right? And I know that strong emotions, 99% of the time, are mine
Mm-hmm.
about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, even when other even when other people project upon me, which I have a nose for now, I can see that honestly, it's like when I really smell when people project upon me, it really kind of sometimes it doesn't even like phase me at all. It's like, oh no, this is just like it's like I can obviously sniff out that you're like heaving shit my way, right? And that really
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have anything to do with me. I can remember a situation. This is many, many years ago. It was at like a house party or something, and I was just bopping around talking to people. Everything's pretty cool, and then had some conversation with some girl, and like her energy was just wild. Like she was just like kind of I don't know what it was. She just had a really intense, really weird energy about her, and we like pissed her off or something. And it was just like, what is happening? You know, it's like this person is so
Mm-hmm.
weird. Come to find out later, it was like her mom died the day before. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
holy fuck. Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. Inside, her insides are exploding, right? Her world just deteriorated to nothing, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
she's like, her energy and her projection then, just got fired out like a Tommy gun, like sort of indiscriminately. But it was like, it made sense then. I was just like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, like how she's viewing the world because of her emotions
Right.
is completely colored by that.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I guess um, maybe it would be helpful just to talk about like some of the different types of projections that people talk about, because generally projections, it's like displacing your own emotions onto other people. So if I was feeling like really sad, or I wasn't able to acknowledge my own emotions, and let's say I was feeling depressed, I would be like, oh, Nick is so depressed. Look at him. He's so sad, right? And you'd be like, oh, I'm not, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you, but
Hmm.
someone's like, oh, are you feeling this or that? And you're like, actually, no, not at all. And it just has to do with like their own lens or how they're seeing things. It can be objects, it can be animals, like the story I told. And a really clear cut example of this is just this one situation in like a group therapy. And this one guy was just sort of talking about seeing this stuffed animal like in a gutter, and how like sad, and like just how he was like, yeah, this teddy bear was just discarded and it was dirty and tattered and torn in the gutter, and it was like so sad. And it was like I could tell that he was overlaying his emotions like onto that, like how he felt inside. He was seeing an external representation. So that can be a projection. And it can also show up in ways where it's like often where people have like shadow aspects, or parts of themselves that they don't want to own, or parts that they're like, this is unacceptable in me, but they'll see it in someone else, and then that's what irritates them, or that's what just drives them crazy. And it's like usually they're doing some version of the same thing, but they can't see it.
Hmm.
So it's like I think a real popular example is when somebody is like already cheating, or they're thinking about cheating and they feel really guilty and whatever about it, and then they accuse their partner of doing the thing that they're doing, or doing the thing that they're thinking about doing, um, which can feel very crazy making, especially if that person's like, why are you suddenly so jealous? Like, why are you suddenly doing this? And it's because they're trying to come to terms with their own emotions, or their own conflict inside, where they're betraying their own values, or they don't like themselves anymore because of this thing. So it's much more comfortable to make somebody else the villain, or be like, it's them, they're awful. But it's like, again, why are you so charged? Like, what's happening in me? Like, why am I so riled up? Why is there so much intensity here? It's important to take a look at those triggers.
So when I think about the guy with the teddy bear, it just takes me back to like the function that your parents are supposed to have in introducing you to a relationship with your own emotions, like the,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I could imagine all the myriad of ways that emotions will find ways to be seen or to be felt or to be heard when you don't have the ability or the context or the education of being with your own being, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, in that case, it's like he has these strong feelings that he senses, but it's out on the bear on the highway, where he can't
Mm-hmm.
just enter into his own body and feel and be with those parts in and of himself. Like, I think all of these are like emotions are messengers. They're for information for us. They're about pieces of our own being, of our own soul, which need our love, care,
Mm-hmm.
and affection, but somehow are not seen by us, somehow by our consciousness as we are in our waking lives. And so emotions never go away, right? They stay with us somewhere in our being, and then find these sneaky avenues, right, to
Mm-hmm.
become real, right?
Yeah.
So so
And yeah. Well, you're right, because it is really sneaky. And I think one of another telltale sign that there's projection there is when you find yourself in like a power differential. Like
mm,
if you feel like you're superior to someone in another way, you're like, oh, I'm up here and my values and my virtue and I'm so great, and they're a sack of shit. Like, like I said, they're the bad guy. It's like taking all this distasteful stuff and just putting it outside of ourselves. And it's just interesting because I've seen this so much in the political arena lately, where what we have is like a lot of extremes, like extreme
Mm-hmm.
points of view, where it's like, no, this is the answer and this is how it should be done. And then there's people on this side saying, no, this is the answer and this is how it should be done. And it's like both sides are saying, look at what they're doing. Like, they're awful, like literally both sides. And it's like, who's awful? They're like, no, I'm so great, they're awful. And they're like, no, I'm so great, they're awful. Right. And then it's almost like there's no median, there's no balance, there's no like, wait a second, can we be really honest about what's happening? Like, is it just true that you're great and your party and all its affiliates are great, and that the only bad things happening are on the other side? Then it's just very interesting, right?
Right.
And incidentally, it's like, if we were to create laws from this extreme, then we are kind of alienating everyone else. And if we create laws from this extreme, then we're alienating, everyone on this side too. And I think about finding something that truly is like balance and considering like the highest good for everyone. And it's just really interesting. Like, I think one of the biggest projections that I see is people saying like they are so selfish. And I think selfishness comes up where sometimes people are really just looking out for like what their own best interest is, but it doesn't actually mean it's opposing your best interest, but it can look that way. And so if you have any relationship to not being able to like set your own boundaries or feel like you can do what you want, then anyone actually like grounded in their own sense of alignment and authenticity may come across as highly selfish to you, which is again like another projection.
So, so we've talked about personal projection, and just to be clear, these are they fall under sort of shadow stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
shadow or unconscious, right? Which is something Jung talked a lot about. So we talked about personal projection, but then you started talking about
Oh yeah, yeah, I did. Yes.
societal
Like group
projection.
projections, societal projections, like stereotypes, like these types of people or these people, this is what they're doing.
Well,
And anytime you villainize anybody, you cut off your like inroads to compassion and understanding and
mm,
really seeing the situation and seeing those people clearly. Because what I believe is true is that people actually are good at heart. The majority of people are trying to do the right thing. But if we put other people, if we project onto them that suddenly they're this vile, and so often it's like one side is saying they're idiots, and then this side saying they're all brainwashed, and it's just like we degrade each other to a point of not having any faith, not having any trust in the intelligence, the self sovereignty, the humanity, the intentions of other people. But what that's really pointing to is a lack of trust and stability in our own sense of knowing if we're there, I would say.
so in personal projection, we talked about the parts, the IFS parts, where they come from, or the
Mm-hmm.
samskaras, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and I don't know the answers to this, do the societal ones follow the same mechanistic pattern, okay? So when I project upon somebody, it's because I have repressed emotional consciousnesses in my being that then I identify with. Um,
Right.
I wonder about that as far as like a societal thing. Now, maybe it's all individual. I don't know like how the hologram really works. It's like, but
I
but
would
I
say,
but I know that
yeah.
the answer, personally, right, especially in parts work, is even when a thing comes up, or maybe that I am rejecting in myself. I can think about going from the higher level, let's say society, and I'm saying that this group is shit. You guys don't know anything. You guys are selfish, and you have an extreme, like degenerate view of the world, right? If I bring
Hmm.
that view down to the own like inside of my own being, and if I had that same energy to myself, it only reinforces what's actually happening, right?
Hmm.
So that's where the curiosity and compassion comes in. That's where the real like love and like the health can start to breathe into your own being, right? And so even when I notice a part or a piece come up inside myself that maybe I would have a reaction to, and like we talked about becoming triggered by our own parts, which I can imagine is a kind of a war like this. If I war against them, it only feeds into that divide. It's by
Yeah.
curiosity and compassion. Those are like the two keys, and like opportunity, right? The spirit of opportunity and creativity. Curiosity, compassion, opportunity, creativity. Like those coming to those parts in that aspect. I think about, can you do the same thing on a higher level, right? In society, like if we all sort
Yeah.
of embody that instead of fighting, what we're going to bring each other, the curiosity, compassion, the opportunity, and the creativity to differences, right? In that
Hmm.
spirit, then that maybe then you could begin to like listen and to react and to heal instead of fighting, right?
Well, right. It's like how we respond to the outer world. It's like that is the macrocosm,
Yeah, as above, so
the
below.
external projection of what's going on inside the microcosm. So whatever like anger, judgment, fear, dissension we have, and we're seeing it projected, like it's a literal reflection of how we see the world. Like those are our funhouse mirrors. Like
Mm-hmm.
those are our glasses, right? Our perspective glasses that we have. And it's if we do the internal work to understand the triggers and what they point towards, our own fears, our own lack of compassion, what we find like unacceptable, like what is so unacceptable about this. And if we are able to say, well, what if there's a good reason? Like, what if this person, like they're acting this way, but what if I were to understand why they were doing that? What if I could understand like what their motivation was? Like what if I could really ask them and find out? And I'm sure that you would find out that it's from a place of love, of protection, of trying to do what's best, which is the same for like these internal parts that we have. And like
Mm-hmm.
when people, like even when people lie, when people cheat, when people betray, like all those things, it's like they're actually trying to avoid something. They're trying to protect or avoid
Mm-hmm.
something, and it's like people will lie if they think it'll keep them safe, right?
Right.
So it's like you have to look at like what the fear is that is driving people. And then you can start to get a look at like their humanity and saying like they're human, they're scared,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you can understand that also that is happening within you too, then you can say, okay, what is like the bigger truth here?
Mm-hmm.
Like is it like 1,000% true that like it has to be this extreme? Is it 1,000% true that it has to be this? Or is the solution really a mixture, is really a coming together of us, not demonizing, not villainizing, but saying, I want to understand, let's have a conversation, because the solution is going to come in the balance, not in the extremes.
Right. So earlier we talked about, when we just spitballed, maybe 20% of people are aware of the emotional realms and about projection and about how the shadows work and the function of those, and some of the sort of medicine that you can take, right? Which is what we talked about, like compassion and curiosity and things like that, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
20%, which is total spitball, who knows if that's what kind of number, then 80% is in Shadowland, right?
Yeah.
Like disconnected from their own deep emotional desires, right? Uh,
Yeah.
don't have the connection between the higher mind and their deep emotional body. Their emotional bodies are crying out to be met, projecting out on people. Like no wonder that there's a
Hmm.
cacophony of communication, right? In the age of communication, right? No wonder why
Right.
things are so like cray.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten to a point where there are so many fears and motivations and reasons for. So, like, if you think about it, anytime you involve a human in any system, you're going to have like a light aspect and a shadow aspect. Like you can have like religion can be good, it can also be highly manipulative. Like so literally you can go on Netflix and watch a documentary, like a horror story about anything. Like there's like Bad Vegan where it's like pure food and wine. Like it was this beautiful institution that served delicious raw food, like gourmet raw food. Anyway, I've been there in New York. I was like obsessed with it for a while. But um, the underbelly, like the dark side of this is that they ended up funneling money away from their servers, like and not paying people, and there was all kinds of like corruption and stuff. So it's just like involve humans in anything, including the media, including science and scientific studies. And it's like when people have fears, those fears will drive them to
Mm-hmm.
do what they have to do. Like literally watch any movie about someone like lying or getting into hot water or whatever, and it's like them having certain values of protecting themselves, protecting their own, like what they felt like they had to do, which was not a win-win situation. It was like you lose, I win. I don't care what happens to you, fuck
Mm.
you,
Right.
but I'm going to win. I'm going to protect me and my own. We're going to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
which is a certain like perspective. It's a certain way of being. And so it's like we have to be very aware that there are all of these influences taking place. And so we are no longer, unfortunately, we never really were. We are no longer in a place where we can just blindly trust this or blindly trust that because this person says this is right. And, it's like, oh, I trust this person. This is right. Well, it's like, that doesn't really necessarily matter. Like honestly what matters is us getting into alignment, like really feeling into our own intuition, our own ability to discern healthy from unhealthy energy, what is correct for us and what is incorrect for us in the moment. And if we're not able to do that and we're trying to find some form of like trust or stability outside of ourselves, these past couple of years should tell anybody that that phase of life, that world as we know it, is gone. You can't
It
look
never
up an
existed
article.
anyway.
No, it never existed anyway. It was an illusion, right? But
Right.
now more than ever, you can't just go on, like you can go online and if you have a personal bias and you say, well, this is the truth, like you can find supporting evidence for that. And then you can go online and like find supporting, like if you have a different point of view. And this is how people are just arguing. And there is like, I believe truth with a capital T. Like I believe that, I don't know, it just makes me think of this, there's always like three perspectives like in an argument. It's like one side, the other, and then like God. And it's like only God knows like what the truth is, because it's like each person is going to filter that situation through their own perspective, through their own
Mm-hmm.
reality, through their entire lived experience, through their own emotions,
Through
like
their
what
own
they can
projections, through their own
through their own
shadows.
projections, yeah, what they remember, like, and then it's like it's even been proved that like you can put someone on the stand but people don't even remember things accurately how they actually happened. So you can have video footage, objective video footage, and then someone else's recollection of what has happened in that situation. You start to realize that it is an entire logistical nightmare for there to be like agreement on any topic whatsoever, because we do in fact create our own reality with what we're choosing to focus on and then what we choose to take action on based on what those beliefs are. So if you are living in a place where you are projecting and blaming, and you haven't had enough suffering yet to break open and sort of shatter the illusion of the fact that like there's more to life than being victimized by other people, and that you actually have choice. If you haven't had the amount of suffering needed to do that, don't worry. Like there's plenty more that can like come your way, because it's like we can't necessarily control the timeline of awakening or how the shocks or the things happen, but it's sort of a mystery like how that works. But one thing is guaranteed is that if you are in that place where you're projecting and you're not taking any personal responsibility, you're not going to have any sense of security whatsoever, because you won't have any trust in the one thing that matters most, which is your own connection and alignment with source. That's
Makes me
my
think about
opinion.
makes me think about the resonance of truth, right?
Hmm.
Because when I began to pay attention in earnest to my own emotions, right? Um, it it was like a little bit of a curve. It took some sort of like took some discernment, but I can start to sense the resonance of when. Uh, so for me, it's usually when I have a strong emotion that I know that I can be in a projective place. Strong emotions will then light up my thought processes, and a lot of the strong emotions that I
Hmm.
have now are old thoughts, so they're not new, they're not necessarily novel. They usually come with a certain type of impetus and a certain flavor that I recognize, right? And though the thing can come up inside of me and kind of, we'll say, take the helm for a little bit, come up inside of my being and create a bunch of thoughts. I don't necessarily I have the discernment now that I can not really listen to them as rote, as like this is how life is, because it becomes a perspective. Um,
Right.
right. And so I think about the resonance of that. And so what I am starting to get like a picture of is um, parts, deep emotional wounding, how that comes up and lights up things and can be projective and even reflective into my own being. And then I don't know necessarily if I have like a deep relationship with truth, but sometimes you can feel like when the energy shifts a little bit, right? Or like it raises up a
Hmm.
little bit and just
Hmm.
kind of feels good. Like that can be like a bellwether of like, oh, I don't know, that kind of like raise the vibration a little bit. And I could feel it kind of come up a little bit. Maybe we'll call
Right.
sort of that truth. I think that sort of like internal introception of the own energy, can be really helpful, because uh, like one of the hallmarks, which we talked about it, of like when projection is present, right, is strong emotion, right? If strong
Strong
emotion is
emotion.
here, right, or extremes in perspective. Black and white
Yeah.
thinking is another one.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think are just hallmarks of this mechanism in action, right?
And also like constriction, closing down, like
Mm.
any mechanism of protection where it's
Mm-hmm.
like pushing things away, like, no, I don't want to know this or hear this,
A real heaviness sometimes
or
too.
yeah,
Collapse.
or pushing another person away, like we were talking about, like it's you, like you're the thing. And like, so anytime there's just like opposition
Right.
or yeah, just like contraction, constriction around something, that we can tell that there's a part of us that is like preparing for battle. It's closing for protection. It's not in like one consciousness. It's definitely in like divisive thinking and separation, right? And not even pure separation where it's like we're equal. It's usually some kind of power imbalance as well. Either I'm better than you and you're below me, or I'm below you, you're better than me. Like there's just a lot of different layers of projection that can be happening. Or like, this is your behavior and you're a sack of shit, but I am amazing.
So in terms of attachment styles, what are some of like the more common projections for the different, big categories of
Oh,
attachment?
that's a really
So
good question.
I think about anxious, right?
Yeah.
The big projection of anxious is like you're going to give me what I need, right? I don't know,
Well,
maybe.
I think that's part of the expectation that like, oh my God, like they'll get really excited early in relationship because they're like, oh my God, this person's going to give me what I need. It's going to be great. And they're like, you know, amazing.
Maybe it probably this is a tough one too, but the other projection is of these are like big, like 50,000 foot overviews of
Well, you
how.
can have like light projections. Like you can project onto someone that they're your savior. Like it doesn't always have to be negative things. Like you can literally project like this person's perfect, right? And then there's no
Oh
sense of
yeah,
discernment, which then
like
it gets
twin
very
flames, right? But that's
true.
okay.
Yeah, it can.
That was a hallmark of like what I wanted to say about really strong emotions, right? In terms of like meeting people, if you have a really strong emotion about somebody, that's usually a clue, like a big giant red clue, that you're about to reenact some very old, very deep, because those strong emotions came from somewhere. They didn't just like fall out of the sky and are a
Right.
clue that this is something that is really. I mean, it can be wonderful because you could learn a really deep lesson. That can also be true, right?
Yeah.
It could be shining a light. So it's a double edged sword for sure, but it can be a clue that it's a projection of something very old, something very deep in your being. If you meet somebody, you're like, this is the one. You're the one. You're the only one.
It it can be, or I mean, it could actually also be the one too. And like this is where we get into
What?
like some slippery. I mean, it could be like so if if you meet someone and you have like all these elated feelings and they are coming from like that samskara, like that wounded place, this wounded part where it's putting this person up on a pedestal and it's like, oh my God, this is my definition of love and this is just it, right? So if you haven't healed any of your shit and you're having this thing, like time will tell.
Hmm.
But if you have that feeling and it's actually coming from a place of authentic alignment where nothing is triggered and you're just feeling a sense of expansion, a peace, of calm, you know, you might still have these really lovely emotions, but I would say sometimes it could be translated as that being boring because it lacks like the chaos or disorganization. But that's where like discernment comes in because happy emotions don't always point to everything being, glossy and happy and glittery, right?
You mentioned once before about the feeling of this expansion feeling, but also can be, and I know, I know this can happen in a relationship too. But it's like, oh my god, like what's this going to cost me? Because
Right. Well, yeah. So you can do something and have a feeling of knowing that there's an expansion,
mm-hmm,
right? Like your soul is like, yes, like this is the next lesson. This is the next
right,
like thing, the next level. And then you can have a part like your ego being like, oh shit, like I'm scared, right? Because
right.
it's another part of you.
I mean,
So
that sounds like the beginning of a relationship, really. Because like
yeah, yeah.
that especially like after a little while, that like, oh shit, this person is a big deal in my life now. And it can be like,
Right.
oh boy.
I think we're going to have to do another podcast when it comes to talking about like the relationship stuff, like getting into relationship and maybe even more relationship specific, like projections and navigating those things because it's like such a huge topic. But what I was going to say in answering the question for different attachment styles and some of those projections is like, the anxious style, when they get very hurt by avoidance, they can be like, they're very selfish, like they're assholes, right, for taking that space. But what the avoidant is really doing is like they feel safest when they don't have anyone like approaching them or getting close or potentially invading their boundaries or projecting emotional stuff onto them. So
Mm-hmm.
they're just trying to find a place where they feel safe. But how the anxious person how they regulate is through contact. So there's a misunderstanding between the two of them where how they find that place of calm centeredness because of their own respective trauma, which is actually why they're attracted to each other in the first place. They just have different ways of getting that. But when there's projection, then we have judgment over another person and what they're doing. And then we view it through a lens of them being selfish or nefarious, or they're out to get me, or they're just sadistic assholes, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of that is stuff you're making up. Like you actually, until you ask and get curious about another person, you truly don't know what their motivation is or why they do what they do. And then it gets even more confusing in relationship because you can have one person that's projecting on another, and the other person is like, you're projecting all over me. And when they say that, then the other person can be like, no, you're gaslighting me. And then there,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like all over, right?
Right.
And they're like, I'm so
Disaster.
confused, right?
Right.
Disaster. It's absolute disaster. So your perspective, your projections can trigger other people, and then there can be counter transference where they're also projecting back onto you. You're just like my mother, you're doing the same thing, and it's like may be true to some degree, but it's all still filtered through that
Mm-hmm.
perspective, like that funhouse mirror where it's like things really aren't as what things really aren't as they seem.
Right.
Which is why, like, I think sometimes the emotional journey and getting clarity on projections and like what is real and what is not can actually be a really like slippery slope, like a really challenging topic, especially people that have had gaslighting or have had narcissistic parents where they've had every single like thing that they actually need in order to know where they are, like know who they are in time and space, like some form of proprioception. Even like if you have your physical reality denied, then when you have no one validating that, it doesn't give you a very strong foundation of knowing how to trust yourself, which is, you know, we were talking about in therapy, like a big keystone of that is actually learning that self-trust. Like, this is what I'm feeling. It's okay to feel this.
Right.
Because if we have our emotions shamed and our desires shamed, we're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone I work with has this kind of wounding, and it's shitty. It's super shitty to navigate that. It's possible, but it can be challenging.
Right.
And anyway, yeah.
In relationships, dealing with projection. So one of the places I come from, which we talked about today, is like a deep-seated distrust of life and of powerlessness, right? Which is something I
Mm.
have to deal with all the time. And so I project upon you all the time, right? And we've had to go through,
Me?
yeah, you.
Me?
Uh, we've had to like navigate, I don't know, a few dozen different waves, lasting from 5 seconds to like weeks at a time, you know? Kind of like it ends up being like real fucking like work, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's interesting because oftentimes my experience of those projections, I'm just like, yeah, okay. But other times, like if I feel like you're shanking me or stabbing me, I'll be like, oh hell no. And then I get really angry.
fuck
And
this motherfucker. Yeah.
then I have my own stuff that comes up
Right.
around that. And then it's like we're both self-regulating and then coming back into a place of like co-regulation. But yeah, it's like we do like in relationship, like we do relationship work so that our relationships are easy. And you can literally take any relationship you have, because wherever you go, there you are, and you can
Mm-hmm.
use it as a grounds for like discovery, really learning who you are. And like it's so nice if you have a person where you have some like solid friendship or kinship or form of secure attachment to be able to practice these things with.
Mm-hmm.
because that's like your safe place. So when you have something like that, you can definitely use it to expand and like heal in other relationships. Like
Right.
it, it's so you don't necessarily have to like be in a romantic relationship with someone to like do this kind of healing. Like it can be friendships, it can be partnerships. Like there's so many different ways to like do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and I also have my own things where I project onto you. I'm trying to like think of an example right now, but yeah, there has been stuff where I'm just like, oh, he's doing this or he won't have time or space to listen to me, and you're just like, no, I'm good. I'm over here. I'm good, right? But if we don't have those conversations, then I would be over here with my projections and I would just be like, Nick's an asshole. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
talking to him anymore, right?
Right. Right.
But I will, talk to you about my shame or my stuff that's coming up. And I'll be like, this is what's going on in my head. Is that what happened? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what we're agreeing upon is like some of the objective reality, like what really did happen, what your interpretation of that was, what my interpretation of that was. And we do our best to be as honest as we can about what was going on within ourselves.
Right.
And usually anytime there's some kind of spiciness, some kind of intensity, that there's stuff there, for us to mind, for us to look deeper and to use that trigger as a trailhead for just deeper transformation, to really enter into that shit. And it can be really hot and like, ugh,
Well, it
super.
seems like there's always the edge that will be too spicy, or you don't really have the consciousness or the wherewithal to be with that thing because it's too hot. Down in the
Yeah,
shame dungeons, like it's a pressure cooker down there. Like it's there's
right.
some gnarly fucking shit, and touching into those things can be real fucking hot potato land.
It kind of reminds me of if you've ever like had a strained muscle or like a knot, if you try to push directly on that
Mm-hmm.
knot, it's like it will literally try to kick you off of it. It's so painful.
Right.
But if you are to kind of like massage, apply some
Yeah,
heat,
like over
you're
here, a little over here,
yeah,
like
over here massaging the ends and like eventually you get in there, right? But if you're just trying to like go right into the center of the most tension, of the most pain and protection,
right.
then it's like, well, then, I mean, then we kind of get into masculine and feminine energy. And it's
Well,
like,
I think more about parts work. You're not going to have access. You don't get access directly to the heart of the dungeon. You never did,
yes, yes, yes,
right?
yes,
Like there's
right.
layers to this thing, and uh, there's trust, right? So
And
one of the
wardens and like prison, like there's other parts that are protecting and the
things I think
protective.
that just in being your friend as long and just navigating our miscommunications is we start developing trust, right? Like that's what it comes to, and then like you can get to like deeper and deeper level if you continue to go and to continue to have the conversations and to continue to be open to feeling about like was that me, like what did I do there, like what happened there, like an accounting of something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating though. I mean, it's I don't know, projections are kind of fun actually when you start to like get into it. I don't know. It's that's sort of my perspective is
Well,
it starts to get
it's just uh, it starts to be everywhere all the time, right? Where it's
yeah.
just like this is just like and so it almost becomes like almost a little bit boring then. It's like what's really going on, like what's really happening, like why are you actually so mad, like because it's not this. I understand like how this shit works, whatever you're talking about, you know it's not that.
Right.
Like let's
Yeah,
get to the actual
yes.
thing. Can we actually get to the actual thing?
Right.
I don't, not quickly, no,
Not
maybe,
always, yeah. Sometimes.
but
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah,
And
and I was hmm?
no, I was just gonna say, I don't know, to me
Oh,
it's a little bit of a bummer, it's a little boring.
you said it's a bummer? Like like when you're aware of projections, or
Well,
do you mean just the fact that like you don't
just
feel like you can?
no, just the fact that it happens so much all the time, everywhere.
Oh, well, I do think that I think it's one of those things like when you are really getting into addressing like some of these energies, it's like if they've been latent for a long time, it's like you're just so much more attuned and so much more aware. So it's almost like what I would say a lot with clients is like you are suddenly seeing all the worms, but there was always a can of worms there. It's just like you weren't always aware. And now it's like all the worms are out of the can, and you have so much awareness and so much consciousness on those that you're actually able to see, identify, feel them everywhere. So you're just so much aware. You're kind of like mapping your consciousness and then learning to have compassion for all of
Or
it,
whatever's
right? And
happening, right?
for whatever's happening, and all of us, like we all have different journeys and like layers and levels of trauma that we're healing. And as Abraham Hicks says, like you never get it done, like you never get it,
Right.
like you're never finished, like it's never,
Right.
whatever. um yeah, but I was gonna like talk like you had went back to like parts work, but I, in my mind, I was kind of going to like masculine feminine energy dynamics. And something I like talking about is like how do we if our emotions are like the feminine energy and our consciousness is like masculine energy. I kind of like to think of it as like a dance, or even like, maybe even almost like sexual energy, or it, I don't know it, how do I say this? I like to describe, why am I talking about this? um the like consciousness. What are you doing?
But nothing.
Consciousness, consciousness,
Vagina.
and like, yes, you said it. Consciousness as like lube, right? So, okay, I'll just explain it. Hold on, just okay. So,
All right, go
I
ahead.
just need to
Lube me up.
explain.
I'm
Yes.
ready.
Okay. So I think of it this way: like if the masculine energy is really like penetrative, like it's very direct, like it's a penetrative initiating energy where it's like going to open like consciousness, open you to more, which is of course like a great sexual allegory, right?
Absolutely. Cool.
So right, so if you have some kind of like painful emotion that's in a state of contraction,
Yes.
and you try to penetrate said emotional
Yeah,
mass,
that's gonna hurt.
you're right. Like then what's happening? It's like, I don't have like a phallic representation, but you're like, right? This
Yeah.
part is like,
You gotta
right. So what?
spit on it, bro.
Uh, okay, but
Sorry. Sorry.
it is like sex without lube, right? If there's no moisture, it's like not gonna be a good time for anyone. And then of course you're also like thinking about like consent and having the feminine energy feel safe enough to open, like ready to open. So what we want to do with our consciousness is move towards the feminine with a sense of like gentleness, acknowledgement, validation, so that, and that acknowledgement and validation and curiosity and compassion
Feeling.
and gentleness,
Right.
yeah, feeling, attuning, is like lube. And then she's like, oh, you see
Oh,
me,
you
because then she
see
feels
me, you feel
loved,
me. Right.
right? And then
I can
she's like, I will,
relax into you a little bit.
I can relax, I will open my gates. And then it's like the juices start moving, there's flow introduced. And then and then you could invite her into, would you like me to penetrate this obscured thing, which sounds kind of sexual in some ways, but what, like, are you open to like me offering you a solution now to this pain, right? And she's like, okay, yes. And then it's like the penetration and then like expansion, right? So she's gone from contraction into expansion. And then so it's like also that emotional journey of with ourselves, like I know I have alluded it to sex without lube and then lubing,
Right. But
but
this is a
I
process
do
that
think
happens
it's,
in our own beings
yes,
with our own
yes,
energies. Yes.
Right. So you have to consider the dance between the masculine and feminine energy within, and how we want to respect and listen to, and like how it actually works
Hmm.
is to honor the feminine energy so that she feels safe in being able to open, and you're kind of asking her to be receptive, waiting until she's receptive to the expansion that you're offering. Because if not, she's like, I don't feel safe. I don't know what's happening. Like, I'm not ready for this and whatever. And it's just sort of that way. And you don't want to have those like intrusive vibes with yourself, emotionally or otherwise. I'm not going to say the word. You don't want to energetically be doing that to yourself or anyone else. Right.
Yeah.
So I just view it as like, be smart about it, like take your time, don't try to force the expansion or
Hmm.
awareness, but like
Yeah, or
give
get
it
mad at it
some.
for not changing right away, which is something I struggle with.
Right, yeah, so like it's like you want to give it some sweetness and be like, hey sweetheart, what's up, like
I mean,
I'm here to listen.
I think
I'm
about
here to
earnest
listen.
sweetness, right? Earnestness,
Yeah, I don't
like
mean
hey,
yeah, I don't mean it's like this. I don't be like, hey baby, what's up? I'm here
hey,
like, I hear you.
hey.
Right, I don't mean that, because then she'll be like, hey, what do you want from me?
I'd
Like,
be like,
women can pick
fuck
up on
you.
that.
Yeah,
Fuck you. Yeah. But
right.
what it
Earnestness.
is like, yeah, earnest, like, hey, I care about you. I'm checking in on you. I'm connecting with you. It's not to fix you. It's not to change you. It's not to get an outcome. It's me honoring you right now as you are in your own illusion, in your own place of darkness and contraction. I'm here to acknowledge and validate you and just be here in this space, holding the space for you. And when you are ready, we can initiate your expansion, but not without your permission, because that is free will. And of course, you can invite her into like the idea of what you want to create together. Like when she's ready, offer a solution or offer a vision of what the solution could be. And if she's open to it, the feminine energy, like the emotional energy within you, or even another person, right? If their emotions are activated, it's like inviting them into a vision of what it could be like, and then make and like holding the space for that too, the fear, moving through it, accountability along the way as you move towards that. And it's never pushing, pulling, forcing. It's never like you need to fix yourself and be over here. It's like, no, I'm right here with you. I don't demand that you need to change. I don't need to fix you. I don't need you to be someone else other than who you are. I'm right here. And also, the masculine energy can see the solution, can see the expansion, which is why men are so often like, here, let me help you fix this. I feel that you have a problem. I'm trying to come in with my penetrative expansion to illuminate the darkness that is here, which is like also like the universal masculine energy. And our emotional selves are, we have the free will to say, no, I'm not ready for that expansion right now. And it might be that it's not the time, it might not be the person. And if they're not ready for the solution, then there's no expansion,
Right.
because
So,
the universe can also never violate our free will.
so
So
respecting the energy, respecting the state of the energy, in earnestness, being there, and then
mhm.
when when the stars align, that's when you can offer your deep gift of masculinity or femininity, right? Back and
Yeah,
forth. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's like being very attuned to that like crack or that opening, when it's like it's almost like when you're in that moment, when you're attuned, like you feel when that opening's there, there's like a sudden like softness, and there's a sudden like release, like the protection, like the gates are starting to open, like. And I think that all of us have a certain sense of what that feels like. You can watch a movie, like you can see like when a child is just like starting to not cry, like they're just starting to be like, oh, I'm feeling better now. Like we can all observe a nervous system, or we can observe an emotional journey, an energetic journey, from a place of shame, victimization, anger, being closed off, into opening and moving up the energetic ladder. There's signs of this everywhere. Like this is like the energetics of life, the energetics of relationships.
And the energetics of our inner beings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Projection.
anyway, I guess projection. High five. It's just, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know if there's anything else to say on that, but
Well, we said
yes.
a lot. Enough to chew on anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I feel fine about throwing my 2 cents into the wishing well here.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. So anyway, shout out to everyone listening again. Oh, you know what would be great? If people would write reviews, like to have some reviews, because I don't think we have any reviews yet. And we're
Do
going
they
to
write
be
them
like
on
11
Apple?
episodes.
Or do they write them on Spotify? Do they
No, I
do?
think they can. I think they can write them on Apple or Spotify.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I don't know. Apple, I know, yes.
I don't know either.
Spotify, I think,
Yeah.
maybe. I'm not sure about that, but somewhere, maybe. Can they write reviews on YouTube?
No, you can write a comment.
Okay, so like comments or reviews would be helpful if you feel very generous. We would be happy to accept those. And then, of course,
I just
if
want
you
to
have
apologize for being crass earlier. If I was too
What do you
crass
mean?
for anybody. I said some maybe crass things. Anyway, I just wanted
Oh,
to say
you
I'm
did, but if they're listening to us, they're probably like not going to care so much. And
Yeah.
if they're offended, then they should check
Anyway,
their projections.
It's just a thing. Anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, check your projections at the door.
Yeah. Stop projecting. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. Okay, we're gonna go now and see you all real soon.
Cool. Thank you, Angel.
Yeah, you're welcome.